In Drolan, a kingdom known for its lush valleys and peaceful towns, a calamity struck that would forever alter its fate. Without warning, the sky darkened as a massive swirling vortex, known as the Rift of Nether, ripped open above the central castle. This sinister portal, pulsating with a malevolent energy, unleashed a torrent of demonic entities into the world. Shadows twisted into grotesque forms, and the air filled with the sounds of terror and chaos. Knight Commander Darius, a figure revered throughout Drolan for his unwavering courage and battle prowess, was quick to respond to this unprecedented threat. He was a man in his late 40s, with a presence that commanded respect. His armor, marked by dents and scratches from countless battles, shone under the eerie light emanating from the rift. His eyes, steely and resolute, reflected a determination that had been honed over years of conflict. Gathering his elite knights, a group of the finest warriors in the kingdom, Darius outlined a daunting plan: to journey directly towards the heart of this catastrophe and close the rift. Each knight, clad in armor and bearing weapons of the finest craftsmanship, shared a look of resolve, understanding the gravity of their task. As they set out from the castle, the magnitude of the disaster became apparent. The once bustling streets of Drolan were now scenes of destruction and despair. Buildings lay in ruins, and the air was thick with the stench of brimstone and ash. Desperate citizens, their faces etched with fear, sought refuge wherever they could find it. The demonic entities, varied in form and size, wreaked havoc across the kingdom. Some were towering behemoths, rampaging through the streets, while others were more insidious, lurking in the shadows, their eyes glinting with malice. The knights engaged these foes with grim determination, each encounter testing their skills and resolve. Their journey took them through villages and towns, each scarred by the demonic invasion. Fields that were once green and fertile were now scorched and barren, the crops withered and dead. Livestock lay strewn across the landscape, victims of the demon's hunger. As they traveled, the knights aided the survivors they encountered, offering protection and escorting them to safer areas. Darius, despite the urgency of their mission, never lost his compassion for the people he was sworn to protect. He understood that the heart of a knight lay not just in valor, but in mercy. The path to the rift was fraught with danger. Ambushes by demonic forces were frequent, and the landscape itself seemed to turn against them, with fissures opening up and spewing forth noxious fumes. Yet the knights pressed on, their armor dented and their faces smeared with grime and sweat, but their spirits unbroken. As they neared the rift, the sky grew darker, and the air became suffused with a palpable sense of dread. The very ground beneath their feet seemed to tremble in fear of the portal's malevolent power. It was here that Darius and his knights prepared for the greatest challenge of their lives, closing the rift and saving their beloved kingdom from utter ruin. After leaving the ravaged outskirts of Drolan, Knight Commander Darius and his band of elite knights ventured into what was once known as Eldergrove Forest. This sprawling woodland had been a sanctuary of natural beauty, a place where villagers would picnic under the shade of ancient oaks and children would play hide-and-seek among the ferns. Now, it stood before them as a grotesque shadow of its former self, transformed by the rift's malignant influence. As they entered the forest, the atmosphere shifted palpably. The air was thick with a miasma that seemed to warp the very essence of nature. The once majestic trees were now gnarled and twisted, their bark resembling leering faces and their branches writhing like serpents. Thorns, sharp and venomous, adorned these branches, making passage treacherous. The forest floor, once carpeted with soft moss and fallen leaves, was now a tangle of roots and vines that seemed to move of their own accord, grasping at the knights' feet as they marched. The light that filtered through the canopy was sickly and dim, casting eerie shadows that danced and flickered, disorienting the knights. The wildlife of Eldergrove had undergone a horrifying transformation. Creatures that were once benign now prowled the underbrush with glowing, malevolent eyes. Wolves with matted fur and unnaturally large jaws stalked the knights from the shadows, their growls a guttural echo in the dense forest. Birds with twisted wings and sharp beaks circled overhead, their screeches like the sound of tearing metal. Darius, at the forefront, led his knights with a steady hand. His sword, a gleaming blade that had been passed down through generations of his family, was drawn and ready. The knights moved in a tight formation, shields raised, eyes scanning the foreboding landscape for any sign of attack. The first encounter came swiftly and without warning. A pack of the mutated wolves leapt from the underbrush, their eyes ablaze with hunger and rage. The knights reacted instantly, their training evident in the precision and coordination of their defense. Swords clashed against fangs, and shields blocked snapping jaws. The battle was brutal and swift, with the knights managing to fend off the beasts, but not without sustaining injuries. Further into the forest, the challenges grew. Vines as thick as a man's arm and covered in thorns shot out from the trees, attempting to ensnare the knights. Darius, with a swift stroke of his sword, cut through the vines, freeing his comrades. They pressed on, their armor scratched and dented, but their resolve unshaken. The deeper they ventured, the more surreal the forest became. The very air seemed to distort, and sounds were muffled, as if the forest itself was trying to disorient them. Strange, luminescent fungi grew in patches, casting an otherworldly glow on their surroundings. The knights saw figures in the distance, or thought they did, only for them to vanish when approached. As night fell, the forest grew even more treacherous. The knights set up a makeshift camp, their backs to a large, gnarled tree that provided a semblance of shelter. They took turns keeping watch, the forest alive with the sounds of unseen creatures and the occasional glow of eyes in the darkness. Throughout the night, they fought off sporadic attacks from the forest's denizens, not just wolves, but also creatures that defied description, twisted amalgamations of various animals, all bearing the unmistakable mark of demonic corruption. As dawn broke, the knights packed up their camp and continued their journey through the corrupted forest. They were battle-weary and on edge, but driven by a purpose that transcended their own fears and fatigue. The forest, with all its horrors, was but one obstacle in their quest to seal the rift of Nether, and they would not be deterred. After enduring the nightmarish ordeal of the corrupted forest, Knight Commander Darius and his knights emerged into a clearing, only to be met with a sight that was as unexpected as it was chilling. Before them lay the ruins of what was once known as Harrowdale, a village that had been thought destroyed and abandoned long ago. Now it stood partially rebuilt, its structures crude and haphazard, a stark contrast to the memories of a once thriving community. As they cautiously approached, the knights observed the villagers. These people moved with a strange, listless air, performing their daily tasks in an almost mechanical fashion. Their eyes, when they met the knights, held a vacant yet unnerving calmness, as if they were seeing through a veil of otherworldly influence. Darius signaled for his men to lower their weapons, but remain vigilant. They walked through the village, their presence drawing the attention of the inhabitants who watched them with a mix of curiosity and indifference. The air was filled with an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional distant sound that none could identify. Approaching the village centre, they encountered an elderly man, his hair a wild tangle of white, his eyes a clear, unsettling blue. He introduced himself as Eldan, the village elder. His voice was steady, but there was an undertone that suggested a deeper knowledge of the dark forces at play. Darius, maintaining a demeanour of calm authority, questioned Eldan about the village's survival and the nature of the demonic presence. Eldan explained that when the rift opened, many villagers fled or perished, but a few, driven by desperation or madness, chose to stay. Over time, they found ways to coexist with the demonic entities, some even embracing the corrupting influence as a means to survive. The elder spoke of the demons not as mere monsters, but as beings with their own hierarchies and purposes. Some were brutes, reveling in destruction and chaos, while others were more cunning, offering dark bargains to those willing to listen. He warned the knights that the demons were not just physical threats, but could invade the mind and soul, corrupting from within. Darius listened intently, his mind processing this information, understanding that their battle against the demons was more complex than he had initially thought. He asked about the ways in which the villagers had adapted, seeking any knowledge that might aid them in their quest. Eldan hesitated before revealing that some villagers had taken to performing rituals, ones that appeased the demons in exchange for protection. These rituals, he confessed, often involved sacrifices and pacts that left the participants forever changed. The knights exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of horror and determination. This revelation shed light on the unnatural calmness of the villagers and the eerie atmosphere that pervaded the settlement. As they prepared to leave the village, Darius thanked Eldan for his insights. The elder's final words to them were a warning. "The demons are ever watching, ever listening. Trust not only your swords, but your hearts, for the true battle lies within." With this ominous advice lingering in their minds, the knights departed Harrowdale. The journey of Knight Commander Darius and his knights towards the Rift of Nether had been fraught with danger and revelation, but nothing prepared them for the treachery that would emerge from within their own ranks. The revelation occurred as they made camp one chilly evening, a few days' travel from Harrowdale. The knights, weary from their journey, were setting up tents and tending to their mounts when Elric, one of the most skilled and respected among them, began acting suspiciously. He was a tall, broad-shouldered knight, known for his prowess in battle and his stoic demeanor. Darius noticed Elric distancing himself from the group, muttering under his breath as he fiddled with a small, intricately carved box. His behavior was strange enough to raise suspicion. Darius approached him, inquiring about his actions. Elric's response was evasive, his eyes darting away as he spoke, a clear sign that something was amiss. Later that night, while the camp was asleep, Elric made his move. He crept towards the horses, intending to release them, an act that would leave the knights stranded and vulnerable. However, his actions were noticed by Aidan, a young but observant knight. Aidan raised the alarm, rousing the others. Confronted by Darius and the rest of the knights, Elric's demeanor changed drastically. Gone was the stoic warrior they knew. In his place stood a man with a wild, desperate look in his eyes. He raved about the power the demons promised, how he had been offered strength beyond imagining in exchange for his allegiance. The camp erupted into chaos. Some knights moved to restrain Elric, while others were frozen in shock. Elric, with surprising strength and agility, fought back fiercely. He revealed that he had been enhancing his abilities with demonic energy, a forbidden and dangerous practice. Darius, grappling with feelings of betrayal and anger, attempted to reason with Elric, urging him to renounce his allegiance to the demonic entity. However, Elric was too far gone, his mind twisted by the corrupting influence. With a burst of dark energy, he broke free from the knight's grasp. In the ensuing scuffle, Elric wounded several of his former comrades, his sword imbued with a sinister aura. Darius realized that they were not just fighting a traitor, but a man who had been fundamentally changed by demonic corruption. As the confrontation reached its peak, Elric, seeing no way out, made a desperate decision. He cast a smoke-like spell, engulfing the camp in darkness. Using this cover, he fled into the night, disappearing into the woods that surrounded the camp. The knights were left in disarray, their trust shaken by this betrayal. Darius, ever the leader, rallied his men, tending to the wounded and calming the shaken. He knew that this incident was a grim reminder of the insidious nature of their enemy, capable of corrupting even the most loyal and brave. With heavy hearts, they broke camp at dawn, continuing their journey towards the rift. In the wake of Elric's betrayal, Knight Commander Darius and his knights continued their journey towards the Rift of Nether, their spirits weighed down by the treachery they had encountered. As they traversed a rocky terrain marked by the scars of demonic corruption, they came across a lone figure standing atop a cliff, surveying the land below with a keen eye. This figure was Lyra, known in hushed tones across the land as the Demon Hunter. She was a striking presence, her lean and agile frame clad in a suit of dark leather armor that was adorned with an array of demonic trophies. Fangs, claws, and talismans, each a testament to her victories against the creatures of the Rift. Her hair was a wild mane of red, and her eyes held a fierce, unyielding determination. Lyra descended from the cliff with the grace of a predator, her movements fluid and purposeful. She approached Darius and his knights, introducing herself with a voice that was both commanding and tinged with a hint of an unplaceable accent. She spoke of her years spent hunting the demons that emerged from the rift, learning their behaviors, their weaknesses. Darius, still reeling from the betrayal of Elric, regarded Lyra with a mixture of caution and curiosity. Her reputation as a demon hunter was known to him, but her solitary nature and unconventional methods were a source of concern. He knew, however, that the path ahead required every advantage they could muster. Lyra explained that she had been tracking a particularly insidious demon, one that had eluded her for months. This demon, she believed, was a key lieutenant in the forces spewing forth from the rift, and its elimination would significantly weaken the demonic incursions. After a brief but intense discussion, Darius agreed to accept Lyra's aid. Her knowledge of the demons, gained from years of hunting them, was invaluable. She, in turn, recognized the strength and honor in Darius and his knights, seeing them as allies in her relentless battle against the dark forces. Lyra's methods were unorthodox. She relied on agility and speed, her attacks precise and lethal. She carried an array of weapons, twin daggers with runes etched into their blades, a crossbow with bolts dipped in a substance lethal to demons, and various traps and snares she had designed herself. As they journeyed together, Lyra shared her knowledge with the knights. She taught them how to recognize the signs of demonic presence, how to exploit the weaknesses of different types of demons, and how to shield their minds against the corrupting influence that had claimed Elric. The knights, initially wary of Lyra, began to respect her. Her brusque manner hid a deep-seated hatred for the demons, stemming from a past tragedy she did not speak of. In her, they saw not just a fearsome warrior, but a fellow soldier in their war against the darkness. Together, they faced several skirmishes with demonic forces, each encounter testing their combined strength and newly acquired knowledge. Lyra proved to be a formidable ally, her expertise complementing the knights' training and discipline. As Knight Commander Darius, his knights, and Lyra, the demon hunter, drew closer to the Rift of Nether, a new and insidious threat began to manifest. The knights, once a time for rest and respite, turned into a battleground of the mind. A demon with the ability to infiltrate and manipulate dreams started to torment them, turning their sleep into a canvas for nightmarish visions. The demon, known as the Dream Manipulator, was a master of psychological warfare. It did not attack with claw or fang, but struck at the very hearts and minds of its victims. Each night experienced vivid, terrifying dreams that preyed on their deepest fears and insecurities. Aidan, the youngest of the knights, found himself reliving the moment of Elric's betrayal night after night, his dream self unable to prevent it, each time feeling the sting of betrayal anew. He awoke each morning, his trust in those around him eroded, his eyes haunted by doubt. Gareth, a knight who had seen many battles, was plagued by dreams of his past failures. He saw the faces of comrades he couldn't save, heard their screams, and felt the weight of their loss crushing him. It sapped his strength, leaving him weary and filled with remorse. Even Darius was not immune. He dreamt of the kingdom of Drolan in ruins, its people lost to the demonic invasion, and himself powerless to stop it. These dreams shook his unwavering resolve, planting seeds of despair in his mind. Lyra, familiar with the tactics of such demons, recognized the signs of the dream manipulator's influence. She gathered the knights and explained that the demon was targeting their mental and emotional vulnerabilities, seeking to weaken them from within before they could reach the rift. Drawing on her extensive knowledge of demons, Lyra concocted a plan. She had in her possession a rare herb known as dream shade, which could shield the mind from external influences during sleep. However, the herb was in limited supply, and its protection was temporary. Each night, before they slept, Lyra prepared a small fire and burned the dream shade, its smoke creating a protective barrier around their camp. She advised the knights to focus on thoughts of strength and unity as they fell asleep, reinforcing their mental defenses against the demon's attacks. The effect was not immediate, but over the subsequent nights the intensity of the nightmares began to wane. The knights found themselves able to recognize the illusory nature of their dreams and in some cases even fight back against the visions conjured by the dream manipulator. This battle of the mind brought the group closer together. They shared their experiences around the campfire, finding strength in their shared vulnerability. The ordeal also served to deepen their trust in Lyra, who had not only proven her prowess in physical battles, but also her wisdom in dealing with more esoteric threats. As Knight Commander Darius, his knights, and Lyra the demon hunter ventured ever closer to the Rift of Nether, the very fabric of reality around them began to warp in unsettling ways. The Rift, a gaping wound in the world, was not just a portal for demons, but a distortion of time and space itself. The landscape around them grew increasingly surreal. The ground beneath their feet would occasionally ripple like a disturbed pond, and the sky above twisted into impossible patterns. Trees and rocks seemed to flicker in and out of existence, replaced momentarily by visions of other places, other times. The most disturbing phenomenon, however, were the echoes, ghostly apparitions of past battles and fallen comrades that appeared before the knights. These apparitions were not mere illusions, but vivid, tangible manifestations of their most harrowing memories, brought to life by the Rift's corrupting influence. Aidan, still grappling with Elric's betrayal, was confronted by a vision of the traitor knight, his form flickering between the trusted comrade he once knew and the corrupted version that had fled into the night. The apparition spoke in Elric's voice, taunting Aidan with words of doubt and guilt. Gareth faced echoes of a battle from his past, where he had lost many of his fellow knights. The phantoms of his fallen friends appeared before him, their eyes accusing, their voices whispering of his failure to protect them. Each time he tried to speak to them, to apologize, they vanished like smoke, only to reappear moments later. Even Darius was not spared. He witnessed the destruction of Drolan, his beloved kingdom, over and over. The streets were filled with the screams of his people, and the sky burned with an unholy light. Each time the vision replayed, it ended with Darius standing alone amidst the ruins, the weight of failure crushing him. Lyra, recognizing the danger these echoes posed, urged the knights to focus on the present, to remember that these visions were nothing more than the Rift's attempt to break their spirit. She reminded them that their strength lay in their resolve and their unity, qualities that the Rift could not take from them. The knights, drawing upon their training and their bond with one another, began to push through these haunting apparitions. They learned to steady their minds, to acknowledge the echoes but not be swayed by them. It was a grueling test of their mental fortitude, each step forward a defiance of the Rift's power to manipulate their fears and regrets. As they progressed, the distortions of reality grew more intense, the boundary between the past and the present increasingly blurred. Time seemed to stretch and compress unpredictably, and the landscape shifted without warning. But the knights, led by Darius and guided by Lyra's wisdom, continued their march towards the Rift. The experience of confronting these echoes left a profound impact on the knights. It forced them to confront and accept the painful aspects of their past, to find closure and, in doing so, to forge a deeper connection with each other. They emerged from this trial not just as warriors fighting against a demonic threat, but as comrades bound by shared struggles and a shared purpose. Amid the disorienting challenges presented by the rift's echoes, Knight Commander Darius and his knights faced yet another formidable adversary. This time, it was not a creature of brute force, but a being of cunning and guile, the demon of deceit. This demon was unlike any they had encountered before. It took the form of a tall, slender being, with an almost human-like appearance, its skin a shifting tapestry of shadows. Its most striking feature was its eyes, which gleamed with a hypnotic light, constantly changing color like opals in the sun. The demon of deceit spoke in a voice that was soothing and persuasive, its words laced with an unnatural charm. It appeared to the knights as they were navigating a particularly dense thicket near the rift. The demon praised their bravery and strength, remarking on the challenges they had overcome. But beneath its words of admiration lay a sinister intent. It began to sow seeds of doubt and suspicion among the knights, subtly at first, then more overtly. The demon of deceit whispered to Aidan of power and glory that could be his if he abandoned his comrades. It reminded him of Elric's betrayal, suggesting that perhaps others among them harbored similar intentions. To Gareth, it spoke of his past failures, insinuating that his companions might see him as weak or unreliable. To Darius, the demon presented visions of a peaceful kingdom, free of demonic influence, but only if he was willing to make a dark bargain. It preyed on his sense of duty and his fears of failing his people, offering easy solutions in exchange for compromises that would betray his honor. Even Lyra was not immune to its manipulations. The demon of deceit tried to convince her that the knights would never fully accept or understand her, that her path was one of solitude and that she should abandon this futile quest. But the demon underestimated the bonds forged between the knights and their resolve. The trials they had faced together had not only tested their physical and mental strength, but had also strengthened their trust in one another. Each attempt to turn them against each other only served to reinforce their unity. Aidan, recalling the lessons he had learned from confronting the echoes of Elric's betrayal, rejected the demon's promises of power. He understood now more than ever the value of loyalty and the hollow allure of personal gain at the expense of others. Gareth, bolstered by the support of his comrades through their shared hardships, saw through the demon's attempts to exploit his guilt. He had come to terms with his past and knew that his strength lay in his ability to persevere and protect those he fought alongside. Darius, steadfast in his duty and unwavering in his moral compass, rejected the demon's seductive visions. He knew that the path to saving his kingdom was not through deceit and compromise, but through courage and sacrifice. Together, they confronted the demon of deceit, their unity and shared conviction rendering its manipulations ineffective. Realizing its efforts were futile, the demon vanished in a swirl of shadows, its plans to divide and conquer thwarted. As Knight Commander Darius, his loyal knights and Lyra the Demon Hunter neared the ominous rift of Nether, a chilling encounter awaited them. Emerging from the shadows of the blighted landscape, a figure appeared, its presence sending a shiver of dread through the group. It was Elric, once a trusted member of their order, now a twisted shadow of his former self. The transformation Elric had undergone was horrifying. His once noble features were distorted by the corrupting influence of demonic power. His eyes glowed with a sinister red light, and his skin had taken on a grey, almost lifeless hue. His armor, once polished and gleaming, was now fused with his flesh, adorned with jagged spikes and dark runes. In place of his sword, he wielded a weapon that seemed to be forged from the very essence of darkness, its blade writhing like a living thing. The sight of Elric in this monstrous form was a shock to the knights, stirring a tumult of emotions. Anger, sorrow, and disbelief warred within them. Aidan, who had struggled with the betrayal, clenched his fists, the memory of Elric's treachery burning fresh in his mind. Gareth, hardened by battle, set his jaw, readying himself for the grim task ahead. Darius, his heart heavy with the weight of leadership, knew that they had to confront their fallen comrade, for his soul was lost to the darkness. Lyra, sensing the turmoil within the knights, whispered words of encouragement. She reminded them that the creature before them was no longer the Elric they knew. He was now an instrument of the demonic forces they were sworn to defeat. As they prepared for battle, Elric spoke, his voice a guttural echo of its former self. He taunted the knights, speaking of the power he had gained and the futility of their resistance. With a malevolent grin, he launched himself at them, initiating a battle that would test the knights to their very core. The combat was fierce and brutal. Elric's movements were unnaturally quick, his strikes fueled by demonic energy. The knights fought with discipline and valor, countering his ferocity with their skilled swordplay and teamwork. Darius led the charge, parrying Elric's strikes with his shield, while Aidan and Gareth flanked him, looking for openings to strike. Lyra, with her deep knowledge of demonic entities, provided crucial support. She used her crossbow to fire bolts at Elric, each shot aimed to weaken the demonic energy coursing through him. Her precise shots provided the knights with brief moments of advantage, allowing them to press their attack. The battle raged, the sound of clashing steel and the cries of combat echoing across the desolate landscape. Elric fought with a desperate ferocity, but the unity and determination of Darius and his knights began to wear him down. In the end, it was a combined effort that brought Elric to his knees. A well-timed shot from Lyra disrupted the flow of demonic energy within him, creating an opening for Darius to strike a decisive blow. With a heavy heart, Darius delivered the final strike, ending the tragic existence of the fallen knight. As Elric's body crumpled to the ground, the knights stood in somber silence, each grappling with the reality of what had transpired. They had defeated their former comrade, but the victory was a hollow one, tainted by the loss of a brother-in-arms. As the group led by Knight Commander Darius approached the Rift of Nether, the air around them crackled with a palpable sense of malevolence. The rift itself loomed in the distance, a swirling vortex of darkness that seemed to pull at their very souls. They set up camp for the night, knowing full well that the final confrontation was imminent. However, they were not prepared for the onslaught that would come under the shroud of night. As darkness enveloped the land, a hellish cacophony shattered the night's silence. The demonic army, a legion of nightmarish creatures spawned from the depths of the rift, launched a sudden and ferocious assault on the knight's encampment. The sky turned a deep crimson, illuminated by the eerie glow of the rift, as wave after wave of demons descended upon them. Darius, clad in his battle-worn armor, rallied his knights. They formed a defensive perimeter around the camp, shields raised, swords at the ready. Lyra, her eyes ablaze with a fierce determination, took her position beside Darius, her array of weapons prepared to rain death upon the demonic horde. The demons were a grotesque array of shapes and sizes, each more terrifying than the last. Some charged on all fours, their jaws snapping with razor-sharp teeth, while others slithered on the ground, leaving a trail of corrosive slime in their wake. Winged fiends swooped down from the sky, their screeches piercing the air. As the demons crashed against the knight's defenses, a brutal battle ensued. The sound of clashing steel, the roar of the demons, and the shouts of the knights merged into a symphony of chaos. Darius fought with a controlled fury, his sword cutting through demonic flesh, each strike a testament to his skill and resolve. Aidan and Gareth fought back to back, their swords moving in a deadly dance. They moved with precision and grace, despite the overwhelming odds, their blades finding the weak spots in their grotesque adversaries. Lyra, ever the master of her craft, used her knowledge of demonology to great effect. Her crossbow bolts, tipped with substances deadly to the demons, found their marks with lethal accuracy. She moved through the battlefield like a shadow, her daggers flashing in the dim light as she dispatched demon after demon. Despite their valiant efforts, the sheer number of the demonic forces threatened to overwhelm them. The knights sustained injuries, their armor dented and smeared with the ichor of their foes. But they fought on, driven by a sense of duty and the unyielding will to protect their kingdom. As the battle raged on, Darius realized that they could not withstand the siege indefinitely. He issued a command to concentrate their efforts on a focused push towards a point in the demons' line, hoping to break through and create an opening for a counterattack. With a mighty war cry, the knights rallied and charged, their fatigue momentarily forgotten in the adrenaline of battle. They broke through the demonic lines, cutting a swathe through the enemy and giving themselves a momentary reprieve. The Siege of Nightmares, as it would later be known, continued through the night, a relentless struggle for survival against a seemingly endless enemy. As dawn approached, with the first light of the sun piercing the darkness, the demonic forces began to retreat, unable to withstand the coming day. After surviving the harrowing Siege of Nightmares, Knight Commander Darius prepared for the final and most crucial phase of their quest, closing the Rift of Nether. The Rift, a swirling maelstrom of dark energy, loomed before them, its presence a blight upon the land. Darius knew that the task ahead would be perilous. The rift was guarded by the most powerful of the demonic entities, creatures that drew their strength directly from the portal's dark energies. He gathered his knights, their armor battered and their bodies weary, but their spirits unbroken. Lyra stood beside him, her eyes set with determination, her arsenal of weapons ready. The group advanced towards the rift, their movements deliberate and unified. As they approached, demonic guardians emerged from the swirling darkness. These were not the mindless beasts they had fought before. These were sentient, powerful entities, their forms twisted and terrifying. A titanic battle ensued. Darius led the charge, his sword gleaming with a light that seemed to pierce the surrounding darkness. He moved with a warrior's grace, each strike a testament to his skill and years of training. The knights fought with a disciplined fury, their blades cutting through demonic flesh, their shields blocking hellfire and claws. Lyra, with her deep understanding of demonology, targeted the Guardians' weaknesses. Her crossbow bolts flew with deadly precision, and her traps and snares disrupted the demons' movements, creating openings for the knights to exploit. Despite their prowess, the Guardians were relentless. The knights sustained injuries, their energy waning under the relentless assault. But they pushed forward, driven by the knowledge that the fate of their kingdom rested on their shoulders. As they fought, Darius made his way to the base of the rift. He carried with him an ancient artifact, a relic passed down through generations of his family, imbued with the power to seal the rift. The artifact was a crystal, its surface etched with runes and symbols of a long-forgotten language. Reaching the rift, Darius began the ritual to close the portal. He held the crystal aloft, chanting the ancient incantations that had been taught to him by the sages of Drolan. As he chanted, the crystal began to glow with a blinding light, its energy resonating with the dark power of the rift. The air around the rift crackled with energy, the ground trembled, and the sky darkened as if in response to the ritual. The demonic guardians, sensing the threat to their portal, redoubled their efforts, launching a frenzied attack on Darius and his knights. Lyra and the knights formed a protective ring around Darius, fending off the guardians with desperate resolve. They knew that everything depended on Darius completing the ritual. As Darius reached the climax of the incantation, the crystal pulsed with a surge of power. A beam of light shot from the crystal into the heart of the rift, the energy intertwining with the dark forces within. The rift began to shudder and contract, its swirling energies disrupted by the crystal's light. As the rift started to close, the demons, sensing the loss of their portal, intensified their assault with a ferocity and desperation unlike anything the knights had faced before. The air crackled with dark energy as the demons, their forms grotesque and terrifying, surged towards the group in a final, frenzied attempt to keep the rift open. The knights, though exhausted, rallied around Darius, fighting with every ounce of their strength to protect him and the collapsing rift. Darius, in the midst of his incantation, felt a profound connection to the ancient artifact, the crystal resonating with his own life force. As he chanted the final words of the ritual, a terrible realization dawned upon him. The rift required more than just the power of the crystal to be sealed permanently. It needed a sacrifice, a life willingly given, to close it completely and ensure that it would never be opened again. The battle raged around him, but in that moment, time seemed to slow for Darius. He thought of his kingdom, his people, and the knights who had stood by him through this harrowing journey. He knew what he had to do. With a heavy heart but unflinching resolve, Darius made the ultimate decision. He would be the sacrifice the rift required. As he prepared to give himself to the ritual, his knights, sensing something amiss, turned to him. Their eyes widened in horror as they realized what Darius intended to do. Lyra, who had fought alongside Darius and learned to respect and admire him, cried out in protest. But Darius's decision was made. He looked at his companions, his eyes conveying a message of gratitude and farewell. With a final, determined breath, Darius channeled the last of his energy and life force into the crystal. A blinding light enveloped him, a pure, searing energy that contrasted starkly with the dark chaos of the rift. The knights and Lyra watched in a mix of horror and admiration as Darius's form became one with the light, his body dissolving into a luminous essence that poured into the rift. As Darius's sacrifice was made, the rift reacted violently. A surge of light and shadow erupted from it, a shockwave of energy that knocked the knights to the ground. The demons caught in the blast were obliterated, their screams echoing into oblivion. When the light faded and the knights slowly rose to their feet, the rift was gone. In its place was nothing but stillness and the quiet light of dawn breaking over the horizon. The air was free of the taint of dark energy, and a sense of peace, the first in a long time, settled over the land. The knights, though overwhelmed with grief at the loss of their leader, knew that Darius's sacrifice had saved not just the kingdom, but possibly the world from the darkness of the rift. He had given everything, his very existence, to protect what he held dear. In the aftermath of the battle, as they gathered their wounded and paid respects to their fallen commander, the knights knew that Darius's legacy would live on. He had embodied the true essence of what it meant to be a knight: courage, honor, and the willingness to make the ultimate sacrifice for the greater good. The closing of the Rift of Nether marked both a victory and a time of profound loss for the Knights of Drolan. With the rift sealed and the demonic threat vanquished, the land began to heal from the scars of the invasion. But for the Knights, the triumph was overshadowed by the absence of their leader, Knight Commander Darius, whose sacrifice had been the key to their success. The journey back to the Kingdom of Drolan was a solemn one. The Knights, battered and weary, carried with them the weight of their experiences and the grief for their fallen commander. As they traveled through the towns and villages on their way back to the capital, word of their deeds spread rapidly. People lined the streets to watch them pass, their expressions a mixture of awe and gratitude. Whispers of their bravery and of Darius's noble sacrifice turned into tales that would be told for generations. Upon their arrival in the capital, the knights were greeted with a hero's welcome. Banners flew high, and the air was filled with the sound of trumpets and cheers from the crowd. But the knights, still clad in their battle-worn armor, felt a hollow ache at the heart of the celebration. They rode through the city, their heads bowed in respect for the commander who should have been leading their procession. King Eldred of Drolan, a wise and just ruler, received the knights in the royal palace. He expressed his deepest gratitude for their bravery and mourned the loss of Darius, whom he had regarded not only as a loyal knight, but also as a dear friend. The king decreed that a monument be erected in Darius's honor, a testament to his sacrifice and a symbol of the courage and resilience of those who defend the realm. In the days that followed, the knights took time to recover and reflect on their ordeal. They were celebrated as heroes, but each carried the journey's toll within them. The battles they had fought and the sights they had seen had changed them in ways that only they could fully understand. Among them, Lyra, the demon hunter, found herself at a crossroads. Throughout their quest, she had fought alongside the knights as an ally, but in the process, she had formed a bond with them. In their shared struggle, she had found a sense of camaraderie that she had not known before. Recognizing the depth of this connection and feeling a newfound purpose, Lyra decided to stay in Drolan. She offered her skills and knowledge to the kingdom, dedicating herself to protecting it against any future threats, whether from demons or other dangers. The knights welcomed her decision, grateful for her continued presence and contribution. Lyra's decision to stay also stemmed from a deed to honor Darius's legacy. She saw in the knights and in the kingdom of Drolan the embodiment of the values that Darius had fought and ultimately given his life for. By staying, she could continue the work they had started together, ensuring that Darius's sacrifice was not in vain. As life in Drolan gradually returned to normal, the kingdom prospered under the protection of its heroes. The knights, forever changed by their journey, continued to serve with honor and strength. And Lyra, once a solitary hunter of demons, found a new purpose and a place among the people of Drolan. In the months following the closure of the Rift of Nether, a semblance of normalcy had begun to return to the kingdom of Drolan. The scars of the demonic invasion were slowly healing, and the people were rebuilding their lives with a renewed sense of hope. However, this period of peace was not without its disturbances. Unsettling reports began to surface, suggesting that the influence of the rift, though diminished, was not entirely eradicated. The knights, who had returned to their duties of protecting the kingdom, started receiving reports from the outskirts of Drolan about bizarre occurrences. Farmers spoke of strange creatures roaming the fields at night, their descriptions varying from twisted, wolf-like beasts to shadowy figures that seemed to vanish into thin air. These creatures were unlike any wildlife known to the region and bore a disturbing resemblance to the lesser demons that had once spilled from the rift. In one village, a chilling incident was reported where an entire family disappeared overnight. Their home was found undisturbed, with no signs of a struggle or forced entry. The only clue was a strange, sulphurous odor that lingered in the air and a series of scorched marks on the ground that led to nowhere. The knights, led by Gareth, investigated these occurrences with a sense of growing unease. Each report seemed to point towards a residual demonic presence, a lingering corruption that had not been entirely vanquished with the closing of the rift. This was a troubling realization, as it suggested that the rift had a deeper and more lasting impact on the land than they had initially thought. Lyra, with her extensive knowledge of demons and their ways, offered valuable insights into these investigations. She theorized that when the rift was sealed, some of the demonic entities might have been trapped on their side, cut off from their source of power but still lingering in the shadows. These entities, she surmised, were likely weaker than the ones they had faced before, but were still capable of causing harm. The knights conducted patrols, venturing into the forests and the hills, seeking out these anomalies. On several occasions, they encountered the creatures described in the reports. These confrontations were often brief but intense, with the creatures displaying a cunning and malevolence that was unmistakably demonic. In one encounter, the knights were ambushed by a pack of the wolf-like beasts. The creatures emerged from the shadows of the forest, their eyes glowing with a sinister light. The knights fought valiantly, driving the beasts back, but not without sustaining injuries. The creatures, though physically vanquished, dissipated into a dark mist upon defeat, leaving no trace behind. These incidents were a stark reminder to the knights and the people of Drolan that the threat they had faced was not just a physical one, but a battle against a darkness that could linger and fester. It became clear that the closure of the rift was not the end of their struggle, but the beginning of a new chapter, one where vigilance and resilience would be their constant companions. The knights, taking up this new challenge, dedicated themselves to safeguarding the kingdom against these remnants of the rift's influence. They worked closely with Lyra, who took on a role akin to an advisor, using her expertise to predict and counter these strange occurrences. Months after the closure of the Rift of Nether, the Knights of Drolan were slowly adapting to their role as protectors against the lingering darkness. One evening, as they gathered in the great hall of the castle to discuss their ongoing efforts, a commotion arose at the castle gates. A lone figure, cloaked and hooded, had approached the sentries, requesting an audience with the knights. The guards, sensing something extraordinary about this visitor, sent word to Gareth. As the knights and Lyra emerged from the hall, a sense of anticipation filled the air. They approached the castle gates, where the figure stood waiting, still and silent. The setting sun cast long shadows across the courtyard, lending an air of drama to the scene. As they drew closer, the figure slowly lifted its hood, revealing its identity. The knights gasped in shock and disbelief. Standing before them was none other than Darius, their former commander and hero, whom they had believed to have sacrificed himself to seal the rift. But the Darius that stood before them was markedly different from the man they had known and mourned. His eyes glowed with an unnatural light, a vivid blue that seemed to pulse with an inner energy. His features were familiar, yet altered, his skin bearing an ethereal quality, and his presence exuded an aura that was both commanding and unsettling. For a moment no one spoke, the silence heavy with a mix of emotions, shock, joy, confusion, and an underlying sense of dread. It was Darius who broke the silence, his voice resonant and tinged with an otherworldly echo. He spoke of his journey since the closure of the rift, a tale that was almost beyond belief. Darius explained that at the moment of his sacrifice, when he had given himself to the ritual, his consciousness had been pulled into the rift itself. Instead of perishing, he found himself in a realm beyond their understanding, a place where time and space were distorted, and the laws of their world did not apply. In this realm, Darius had encountered beings of immense power and knowledge, entities that existed beyond the scope of human comprehension. From them, he had learned that the rift was not just a portal, but a bridge to other realities, each with its own threats and possibilities. Darius had been changed by his experience, imbued with knowledge and powers that were both a gift and a burden. He had returned because he had learned that the closure of the rift, while preventing an immediate invasion, had not fully resolved the threat. There were other forces, other realms that posed a danger to their world, and Darius had come back to prepare the knights for these new challenges. The knights and Lyra listened in stunned silence. The return of Darius, a figure they had revered and mourned, was a twist none could have anticipated. His tale raised as many questions as it answered, and his transformation was both awe-inspiring and frightening. As they processed this revelation, the knights realized that their battle against the darkness was far from over. Darius's return signaled the beginning of a new chapter in their ongoing struggle, one that would take them beyond the boundaries of their kingdom and into realms unknown.